So today's lesson is on nets and surface area, and it's going to cover pages 53 to 55. The first question asks you to look at the polygons, and these are the faces of a prism. Name the prism you could make if you assembled the faces. So if we had 4 matching rectangles and 2 congruent squares, what shape would this make when you put all of the sides together? So this would make a rectangular prism. So on the line, that is what you would write. So all you need to do is look at the different shapes and figure out if these are the faces and you put them together, what would it make? So make sure that you're including the word prism. Now, when they say to mark equal sides, they're saying if it's the same length, mark it with one line. So if we looked at the triangle, if all 3 of these sides are equal, you'd give them each 1 dash. Now, are there any sides of the rectangles that need to be the same as the side of the triangle? In order for this side to match up here, they have to be the same length. So these edges would also get 1 dash because they're the same length. Now, if we look at these other ones, those will be the same length as each other, as will all the other long sides because they have to touch when you are producing the shape. So when they say to mark equal sides, they're just asking for those little dashes on the sides. Question 2 asks you to shade the bases of each shape and then complete the chart. So the base is what we name it after. So on this one, we're going to shade the triangles. Now it says bases, so we're going to shade both of them. So what are the number of sides on each base? So how many sides does each triangle have? They have 3. Now, how many non-base rectangular faces are there? So if your base is a rectangle, you wouldn't include it, but how many rectangular faces are there? There are 3 as well, because we'd have a rectangle that comes back here, a rectangle that comes there, and then the rectangle that's going across the front. So there are 3 rectangular faces. So you just need to keep filling in the rest of this chart. Now, what relationship do you see between the number of sides on each base and the number of non-base rectangular faces? What connection do you think we could draw? So the number of sides of the base should be equal to the number of non-base rectangular faces, because each side will need a rectangular face connecting it to the other base. Question 3 asks how many of each type of face would you need to make the prism? So how many rectangles or squares would we need for this shape here? We would need 6. And how many sides does the hexagon have? It has 6 as well. So we should see a continuing pattern. Now, the difference when you get to B is you need to figure out which rectangle goes where, because they've given you specific measurements. So you'll need to figure those out on the shape. Now, question 4 asks you to circle the sketch or sketches that could be the net for the prism. We're just going to do the first one together. So if we had A, we need to make this shape. Could this first one be turned into that shape? Yes, because if we flip this on top, then all of those squares would match up. Now, can the second one? Yes, because they're on opposite sides. So this could be the bottom while this one is the top and everything folds around it. Now the reason the last one cannot is because if you folded it up, you'd have these 2 bases lying directly on top of each other and touching. So there'd be either two bottoms or two tops, but you wouldn't have anything on the other side. So for C, what you'll notice is you have to have congruent shapes, so it means they're facing the right directions on opposite sides of your rectangles that join them. So keep that in mind when you're doing part B on your own. Will the triangles perfectly lie on top of each other? To go back and correct this other question, we're going to go look back at 3 again. It was actually 2. We only need 2 of these faces to build the shape. So we have 6 square faces and 2 hexagonal bases. Thank you for the correction, because that is actually what is correct. Question 5 is going to be looking at nets. So they say to circle the shape that would be the missing face of the net and then add the face. So if we look here, we have 2 triangles, and so we have a rectangle that's connecting these 2 sides. When we fold it up, this rectangle will match this side here. So what shape are we missing? So we still need the smaller rectangle, so you'd start by circling that, and then draw it on here, because that is going to meet up with the 3rd side of the triangle that we have not taken into consideration yet. So you'll do the same thing for part B. Circle the face you need to add, and then draw it onto your shape. For question 6, we're marking the edges that need to be glued. Now, they've done part of question 6, but they haven't finished it. So you'll see that they've drawn arrows to connect these 2 faces would touch. These 2 faces would touch. So now we can keep going. Well, this back face here, it's actually going to connect with the opposite side there, right? When it gets folded around. And we'll mirror it here. So these faces will touch, and then these faces will touch. So it's a little bit confusing, but you're just drawing arrows to connect all the sides that you would glue. Now, question 7, I'm going to actually do on this blank space over here. They ask you to sketch a net for the prism and then name the prism. So this first shape here, what would we call this prism? This is a rectangular prism. Now, you could also call it a square prism, but a square prism is just a type of rectangular prism. So rectangulars, it's more common name. So to draw this out, there are several ways. The way I'm going to choose to is I sometimes start with the bottom face. So I've got my square. Now I'm going to have a long rectangle, and then my other square, and then I could have my other rectangles all coming off the side. So I've got 4 of them so that they connect to all the other faces. There are many different ways of drawing the net, but as long as you have 4 long rectangles and 2 matching squares, and the squares are on opposite sides, you should be fine. So for question 8, we're just going to look at what they've done. They ask you to draw a net for the box on the grid paper and label each face. So they started with the front, and it was 2 by 3. So they made sure they drew 2 by 3 and labeled it front. The top would connect to it, and they know the top is 1 by 3, so they made sure the measurements worked. The back, they're going to connect to the top because it goes on the back side, but it should be the same dimensions as the front. Their right and left sides come out of the front face so they can fold up, and then the bottom goes on the bottom. So this is an easy sequence. So you could do the same thing where you have your front, your top, and your right side, and you could put the rest of the pieces of information together from there. Now, question 9 asks you to write a multiplication statement giving the area of each face for each prism in question 8. So you'll need to be able to look back at it. So if we looked at the front, it was 2 by 3, right? So that is 6 centimeters squared. Is the back going to have the same multiplication statement? Yes. So we would write 2 times 3 equals 6 centimeters squared. What would our multiplication sentence for the right face be? So it could be 2 times 1, or you could do 1 times 2, which gives you 2 centimeters squared. I'll change up the color of the pen here to make this work a little bit easier for you. So 2 times 1 is 2 centimeters squared, and then the left face will be, it'll be the same equation. So 2 times 1 equals 2 centimeters squared. Now, for the top, what will the numbers we multiply be? So the top is 1 times 3, which gives us 3 centimeters squared, and the bottom is also 1 times 3, which gives us 3 centimeters squared. In order to find the total surface area, we need to add up each of these numbers. So we need 6 plus 2 plus 3 plus 6 plus 2 plus 3. What would that give us altogether? That would give us 22 centimeters squared, and because this is surface area and not volume, we need to make sure that the unit is squared and not cubed. Okay? Now, when they ask us to calculate the volume in later questions, we need to remember that that is area of the base times height. So it doesn't matter what shape this is, we need to calculate the area of the base. So for question 10, they ask you to draw a net on 1 centimeter grid paper. So if I were to try and draw this out, I might just make myself a grid here for now. I will need more than this, but if you have graphing paper, you can use that. And then my front needs to be 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters. So I would do 3 blocks by 3 blocks. And then if I were to do the bottom, that's going to be 3 by 2. So I would keep it 3 wide, but now it's only going to go 2 down in order to make that work. Do we see what's happening here? So you'll keep drawing it out just like you did for question 8. So if you need help, you can look at question 8 and find the surface area just like we've done. So you need to find the front, the back, the left side, the right side, the top, and the bottom. However, to find the volume, we need to take the area of the base and multiply it by the height. So what's the area of the base for this rectangle? So I could say that this is the base here, 3 by 2, and that will give me the area of the base, which is 6. And then I need to multiply that by the height. So if I've used the 3 and the 2, then the other height is 3. So that gives me 18 centimeters, but this time it is cubed because this is volume. So remember that volume is cubed, surface area is squared. Question 11a asks you to write the name of each face of the prism on the net, and then write the length and edge on each net. So if they've put the right here, then in between this would be the front. And on the other side, you'd have the left. Then you could have the bottom, the top, and the back. Now, to finish the rest of this, you need to write the numbers beside each one. So if they're telling you this is 4, well, this is the same length, so that's also 4. So you might have your 4, oh, that looks like it should be longer. 4, 4, 4, 1, 4, right? So these are going to be matching up with each other, okay? Now, to find the area of each face, if they tell us the top, well, we know that it's 4 by 4, so it is 16 centimeters squared. So you're just finding each of those faces and putting that in, and then for C, you're adding all of those areas together, okay? Question number 12, I'm going to let you try on your own, but the first part says to write the length of each side on the net. So each of these numbers, you have to write for each of these lengths how long that is. For part B, you need to find the surface area. So you're going to need to do your work on a separate page, but you'll need to figure out the area of each of these 5 shapes and add it up. And finally, you're finding the volume. So remember, area of the base. So the area of the triangle, and then times the height, okay?